Hi, this is Guy Wallace. I started in learning and development way back in 1979, and I semi-retired in 2023. But my current mission as a semi-retired L&D professional is to help enterprise learning and development organizations become more performance-based. Welcome to my podcast. Good day, Lisa. First of all, let me thank you for agreeing to do this podcast with me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to have this chat with you and your audience.
Well, thank you for sharing. So I got a multiple part first end to this podcast. I'd like you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background in L&D. Okay. Give us the name of the tool or technique that you're going to use without going deep into it. But before we go deep into it, share with us a little bit about what's the context for the listener where they might find this useful. Now, I've not asked you to tell me exactly what you're going to talk about today, so this is going to be kind of new for me. I may interject with a few questions or comments as we go along. But so please introduce yourself to our audience and let's get going.
Great. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Giacumo, and I'm an associate professor at George Mason University. That's located in Fairfax, Virginia. So my experience stems from a couple of decades working as an instructional designer, as a manager of a department, as a senior instructional designer, doing learning and development for performance improvement. And I've done that in different organizational contexts, including international NGOs, nonprofit organizations, small startup businesses, multinational for-profit businesses, and government agencies or the Department of Defense. So today I'm going to share with you a little bit about the LEAPS ID model. That's the Learning and Performance Support Instructional Design model with you. And LEAPS ID stands, as I said, for Learning and Performance Support Instructional Design. It's a flexible and iterative model that I've developed with two collaborators, Drs. Steve Villachica and Don Stepich. And we developed it to integrate principles of user-centered design, systems thinking, and performance improvement into instructional design. So that's a little novel take on our instructional design practice. And it's particularly useful for workplace learning and professional development contexts where the goal is not only learning, but also measurable improvements in job performance. And that might be paid or unpaid volunteer work or corporate American government contexts as well as nonprofit and international NGO. So we brought this model to life based on our combined many decades of experience and practice in supporting learning and development in organizations, both as internal consultants as well as external consultants, and our research at the university as well.
Yes, I'm very excited that you're going to talk about this. I know that this is covered in the book that you wrote with Don and Steve, right?
Yes.
Yes. I reviewed that book, but I've read so many things here lately that I'm not sure where I first came across this, but I've known Steve since the 80s, and I've met Don before in our association with NSPI, which is now ISPI. So let's dive in. Tell us more.
Well, two key characteristics of the LEAPS ID model are a focus on both, like I said, learning as well as performance. So learning that is tied to performance or looking to change individuals or organizations' performance. So we wanted to emphasize characteristics of the design processes that we use for developing these types of intervention to support both learning outcomes and job performance. And we also are part of the group that recognizes, as you mentioned, the ISPI group, that recognizes that not all performance issues require training. Some require environmental or systemic change, and oftentimes they might require all three of those changes. So in that way, we take a systems thinking approach, and we wanted to encourage designers to examine the whole system as we do, including the organizational structures, culture, tools, incentives, and feedback loops that all work to support learning and changes in performance. So we draw upon models like Gilbert's behavioral engineering model, the BEM, and similar cause analysis models to diagnose performance gaps, but also build upon them with modern learning science methods and evidence-based empirical research. And so in this way, we advocate for user-centered design that includes both upstream stakeholders as well as downstream stakeholders, including the end users early and often throughout an iterative design and feedback loop process. And so this supports design that meets knowledge, skill, and attitude KSA needs of adult learners, as well as the key performance indicators, KPI needs of organizational systems and businesses. So our approach is really nonlinear, iterative, and scalable. And this allows for continuous refinement through prototyping, testing, and feedback. We show examples of how you can use it with the integration of instructional and non-instructional interventions, because we know that learning is only one part of performance improvement. And so we show how when IDs can consider job aids, process improvements, and other organizational changes, as well as, say, self-paced e-learning or instructor-led training. And the general steps in the LEAPS ID model calls for IDs to define performance needs, so identify business or organizational goals and the desired performance outcomes. And this could be a gap that represents a deficit in performance or an opportunity to build new capacity or lines of business. And we'd like IDs to analyze the performance context along with identifying the gap. So using performance analysis tools to identify root causes and empathize with downstream stakeholders such as managers as well as the intended learner audience. So the design for LEAPS asks designers to consider, as we said, both instructional, so those traditional face-to-face classroom events or self-paced online e-learning, as well as non-instructional solutions. Those might be mentoring systems or coaching systems or job aids or performance support systems based on the learner and user needs in the systemic context. So something that goes beyond just where they might use it, but how they might use it, why they might use it, when they might use it, and what the ramifications are for their use or their integration into the system. And we know it's important to prototype and iterate to build both low and high fidelity prototypes, test them with users in a rapid process, and revise on the fly long before we get to the pilot phase. And so part of the process is to plan also for implementation and maintenance. And it's important to guide deployment of these solutions with the supports in place that you would need to sustain change over time. And we wrap it all up in ongoing evaluation for impact by using real-world metrics to assess learning through observing behavioral change and organizational results. So again, my colleagues and I developed it to demonstrate one approach that's scalable, modifiable, and iterative for an all-inclusive, really agile and systems-informed approach to instructional design for performance improvement. And this reflects, again, our professional experience in consulting for clients, which we still do currently in NGOs, corporate contexts of various sorts, government agencies, as well as academic environments.
So this is a proven process based on it's research informed, so it's evidence-based in that regard. And you guys developed this when you were all at Boise State, and you've moved on recently to George Mason University. Is this part of what you're doing at GMU?
Yes, at GMU, I am in a similar program to where I was housed at Boise State. And we prepare both emerging as well as advancing professionals to work in learning design and technology specialty areas within organizations to support workplace learning and organizational performance.
So how would you compare and contrast the LEAP model to, say, ADDIE, which most people I think would understand? How is it like ADDIE or different from ADDIE?
That's a great question. So I think one way it's similar to ADDIE is we do focus on analyzing the gap, the performance gaps, the performance environment, the organizational systems. We ask people to go through an iterative design process, and that leads in through to development of tools where you then, hopefully have started to think about how to plan for implementation and evaluation. Maybe you've even started to think about those things from the get-go in an ideal situation. So I think that's where we kind of break the mold. While ADDIE has demonstrates opportunities to do ongoing evaluation, formative evaluation all along the way. We talk a lot about how to scale the process for different performance contexts, how it can be used in a waterfall approach or an agile approach, how to scale it, different ways to collect feedback at different points and from different people. And we also, because we wanted to expand from a more traditional waterfall implementation into an agile and iterative implementation, we added an emphasis of design thinking involved in the process. So we ask designers to go beyond collecting sort of this more observational data and to start working towards empathizing with their learners. So thinking about learner personas and what the different types of motivations that learners bring, the different types of pain points that different learner groups might experience along the way, and how to create systems that will meet different learners with different entry points all along the way and bring them up to the desired level of performance through their working with whatever type of systems interventions that designers create.
Thank you. So what helpful hints or guidance might you have for people who would like to try this out? Where do they start? What resources might be available to them for free or at cost? What can you share with us?
Absolutely. So one of the changes in approach that we are advocating for is to consider reframing your project as a way to close a performance gap. So not necessarily that specific topics or outcomes are needed first, but really looking at the system in which your intervention is going to be integrated. And whether that's going to be addressing, as I said, a deficit in the current operation system or an opportunity to build a new capacity or line of business within the operating system. But we feel that focus on performance from the start and throughout is really important, and an approach that we don't often see when we are working with either established designers or designers who are entering into the field of work. And so we created an open website that anyone can access for those who might be interested in learning more and decide whether or not they might like to read the book or get in touch with us. And that website is www.id4orgjustice.com. And so there you'll find more information about what's included in the book, chapter summaries, image of the model, and our contact information.
Well, thank you. I will share that URL in the show notes here for people who want to follow up with us. But I really like what you said about reframing a project. One of the ISPI luminaries way back in the day, 30 years ago probably, was frustrated that we always were positioning ourselves as if we were in the repair business. And he said, that's not quite true. I mean, we can repair a current situation, but we can go into a greenfield operation, and we can use appreciative inquiry to take existing processes, business operations, and help them get even better. So we're not always problem centered, we're sometimes opportunity centered. And so I like that, because I see a lot of people on social media kind of positioning L&D as being in the repair business, as fixing a current state. And that's not quite fair, because we can do better than that. I think it's helpful to reframe from, this being a learning effort or endeavor to something that's really about closing a gap, whether that's problem-centered or opportunity-centered. If I can, I'd like to shift gears here a little bit. I wanted to ask you about people who may or may not be well known in the L&D circles out there on social media, but to help people broaden their networks with people who are evidence-based, who are performance-oriented, can you share with us 1 to 3 names of people who you might recommend others follow?
Yeah, sure, Guy. I assume that the individuals who are listening to this podcast are following you, as do I. So I won't start there. And I know that you post a lot of helpful tips on how to improve enterprise level organizational performance. And I enjoy always reading what you have to share as well. However, some other people that folks out there might choose to follow, whom I also follow, are individuals such as Dr. Jill Stefaniak at the University of Georgia, Athens, Dr. Derry Draper Amazon at ODU, Dr. Steve Villachica in Boise State is a great inspiration to me and someone at whom I really enjoy collaborating with and talking with. Dr. Judy Hale, she is really interesting to talk to, and she brings a wealth of experience in her approach to learning and development. And Will Thalheimer, also in the U.S. And for those people who are outside of the U.S. or looking to broaden their perspective, I'd also like to suggest Belia Nell in South Africa.
Yes, well, thank you for all those names. So I will include in the show notes the links to their LinkedIn profiles so that people can follow up on that. I know most of these people. I met Judy Hale back in 1981 when I moved from Saginaw, Michigan to the Chicago suburbs, and she was just joining the NSPI chapter, and I was just joining that particular chapter, and so I've known Judy for a long, long time. In fact, she was instrumental in ISPI creating their Certified Performance Technology designation, which I think is something that may interest people. ISPI is currently having their annual conference right now, and so I would encourage other people to check into that organization as well as follow up with these people here. Can I shift gears again here? So from your perspective, there's a lot of hand-wringing, I think, going on about the state of L&D and all this. And from my perspective, the issues and the complaints about ourselves that we talk about and write about ourselves, about our field, are the same issues that the thought leaders were wringing their hands about back in 1979. So I don't know that we've made much progress in addressing a lot of these issues, but I remain hopeful. From your perspective, what are some of the biggest problems or opportunities that you see in what I call enterprise L&D which is to take it beyond, corporations and for-profit businesses and such. But what do you see as some of those problems or opportunities, and do you have any suggestions for how individuals, leaders, and organizations might begin to address them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can see how we come around to the same problems time and time again, and I think we're on the verge of being able to really push the envelope and move through a lot of them. So one of the most pressing opportunities for enterprise L&D is to figure out, I think, what can be enabled by artificial intelligence so that more rich human community member input can be gathered to inform decision making. From working with Dr. Stepich Villachica, I know that it used to be in the 1980s, when he was consulting, he would get to be able to touch base with about 75% of the intended learner audience or organizational members. And he'd do that through interviews or focus groups or some other method of rich intelligence gathering for input into addressing the causes of enterprise performance improvement gaps. However, over time, those kinds of processes and budgets have been cut to a very few organizational members' input. And so we just don't have opportunity always to get in touch with more people. And oftentimes, sometimes I know of situations where no member input has been gathered, relying solely on leadership perspectives who are often removed from the authentic workplace, workspace and tasks. And so that makes it even more difficult to produce tangible results. And that results in, sometimes some inefficient and ineffective L&D interventions. But if we can harness the power of artificial intelligence, AI, to support some of our work and use that extra time that we find on our plates to reintegrate member input into our ways of working, I think we would be better equipped to make substantial change with better outcomes in more significant ways. And so the input we need to gather is beyond engagement surveys or other types of surveys. Sure, these types of surveys and other quantitative tools help us to identify where the system is breaking down for individuals, but they don't explain how or why. And so it's those patterns in the qualitative data, the how and why, that are also really required to be game-changing in performance improvement projects. And so it's not enough to ask people what they want or need. We really have to start with investigating and then appropriately addressing the barriers and facilitators of actual contributors' performance, as well as their line managers, their downstream stakeholders, more people in more parts of the systems. And I believe that AI will free up some space for us to do that work and be able to make more significant changes inside of organizations as business partners.
I think that's the what AI can do for us in L&D is yet to be fully determined, but I think that there's a lot of promise there. Let me shift into, what are you doing at GMU, and are you investigating that, and is that part of what your programs address, is the use of AI in L&D?
Absolutely, yes. We have revamped all of our courses to consider different ways of using AI and also make space for people who are coming into the program to share about how they're using it or seeing it. We have guest speakers who are working in the industry in different roles at different types of contexts and organizations come in and share about how they're using it. We're researching and writing about it, different ways to use it, and sharing that back out with our students and our larger community of practice. So we're really engaged in that at GMU in the Learning Design and Technology program at both the master's level as well as the PhD level. And we do offer certificates as well if you already have a master's degree or that's not really an option for you at that time. Our certificate program allows you to move through a sampling of the curriculum a little bit faster. And that's great for people who are maybe upskilling after, being in practice for a long time, or just kind of curious about the field, but don't want to commit to a full master's degree program yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for giving us that overview here. Let's do a final plug here on your book. Tell us a little bit more about your book that you wrote.
Right. So the book it was a fun project, and I'm so glad that I got a chance to write with Doctors Villachica and Don Stepich. It was really a meeting of the minds and the creating of a band. We each brought different perspectives and approaches to performance-based instructional design, and I feel like the book is an output that none of us could have done on our own. But together we made something really cool that I'm super excited about. There's case studies in every single chapter that are based on real life experiences that we encountered while working as either internal or external consultants. For every chapter, there are templates on that free website that I had mentioned earlier that show how some of the ways that we work and some of the data that we gather and some of our process approaches to meeting with clients and stakeholders and preparing to design interventions and make decisions, guide our decisions. And also we have reflective questions at the end of every chapter that help people kind of start to reflect on maybe some opportunities that they hadn't considered in the past for their role, to do more than just support an organization's bottom line, but to really change how that organization operates for the better. And so I think that for a lot of, teachers who are making the transition out of K-12 environment, who are interested in getting into a corporate environment, or somebody who's had a role that's maybe been isolated in an organization before. Maybe they worked at a call center and they weren't, part of a team collaborative experience. The book's really great for those people to show, to kind of guide them through a process where they would be able to develop their own identity and big why, or why are you interested in taking on this role and contributing to an organization. I think our book brings a depth to opportunities and sheds light on opportunities that most people who are entering into our field, or even who have been in our field for a long time, didn't really recognize that they had influence over. And so that's a really cool thing that I'm really proud of in that book.
Well, if you will send me the URL for your favorite place for people to take a look at the book and maybe purchase it, I will include that in the show notes as well.
Oh, thank
Lisa,
you.
thank you so much for sharing with me today in this. I'm all about pursuing performance. I think you are all about pursuing performance. There are many of us, and I would hope that we can help others who are in the field or thinking about entering the field to begin their journey with a performance orientation. Again, thanks so much. You have a great day.
Thanks, Guy. Cheers. We're in this together and we can do it.
Exactly. Bye-bye.
Bye.